The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Okay, that was Julian Assange once again. We play this as often as we can in front of a huge crowd back in 2010 in London, an anti-war rally. I'm Randy Credico, live on the fly here on 99.5 FM in New York City with a special edition of Assange Countdown to Freedom with a very special guest, not new to this show, maybe new to some people who only watch MSNBC and CNN because they're not putting him on. And that is the host of Going Underground, Afshin Rattansi, investigative journalist, author, and a lot more. Thank you once again, Afshin. The string of bad news that has spewed out of the other side of the pond where you are.
Yeah. I mean, I should say, actually, I used to work at CNN. You'd think they would invite me sometimes. I know you and your producer, Kelly, have been doing sterling work on this case. It's obviously very depressing here in Britain. I know you've organized demonstrations in New York City at the British consulate. But while you've been doing things like organizing protests against Britain, Britain has been busy with all sorts of human rights legislation that are sort of simultaneous to the Julian Assange case about human rights, whether it be statutes of limitations of 5 years on British authorities torturing people. We have, I mean, the UN Human Rights Chief has complained about that. I don't see that making much publicity here. And now some kind of nuanced diminution of the European Convention of Human Rights I mean, applicability to Britain being considered by the British Parliament. Of course, the European Court for Human Rights is the last bit of appeal for Julian Assange should court proceedings here end up allowing him to be extradited to your country for 175 years. That seems pretty worrying. That
when did that come down? I'm not even aware of it. Of course, why would I be?
Debating that today, Dominic Raab said, we'll remain a party to the European Convention on Human Rights, but also saying the government wanted to change, reform, and revise how it is interpreted by the courts. This is the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, known here actually for as Transport Secretary. He didn't know about Dover live on camera. Actually, he got the coronavirus figures wrong this morning here in Britain. So he's been satirized, breathless to hear by media. This is word for word what Dominic Raab says about the final court, one of the final courts available to the defense for Julian Assange to stop him being extradited, perhaps to Florence, Colorado, to a supermax prison where his lawyers maintain he will die. The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, saying, we will make it crystal clear that the UK courts are under no duty to follow Strasbourg case law, which itself does not operate a doctrine of precedent. Now, why are they doing all of this suddenly now? I mean, obviously, defenders of Julian Assange will say this is, I I mean, it's one thing doing what you people in the States tell our elected politicians and judges to do. It's another to changing the laws just in case. Because, and I know you played that amazing clip on your, people should watch your fantastic array of people. You had Roger Waters and the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture and Daniel Ellsberg and John Pilger on, and you played that Kunstler piece of video where he talks about the importance that we must attach to the fact that human rights abuses in history have all occurred. Have occurred.
You know what? We're going to play that right now for the audience.
And that's the terrible myth of organized society, that everything that's done through the established system is legal. And that word has a powerful psychological impact. It makes people believe that there is an order to life and an order to a system, and that a person that goes through this order and is convicted has gotten all that is due him, and therefore society can turn its conscience off and look to other things and other times. And that's the terrible thing about these past trials, is that they have this aura of legitimacy, this aura of legality. I suspect that better men than the world has known, and more of them, have gone to their death through a legal system than through all the illegalities in the history of man. 6 million people in Europe during the Third Reich, legal. Sacco Vanzetti, quite legal. The Haymarket defendants, legal. The hundreds of rape trials throughout the South, where black men were condemned to death, all legal. Jesus, legal. Socrates, legal. And that is the kaleidoscopic nature of what we live through here and in other places. Because all tyrants learn that it is far better to do this thing through some semblance of legality than to do it without that pretense.
Obviously, that's one of the great speeches that I wasn't taught about at school. And I don't think high school students in the United States get that, do they? As a matter of course, to explain to them that belief in the First Amendment, for instance, in the United States is a little bit more nuanced than they might be led to believe. So as I say, there are suggestions here that Britain may be changing the Human Rights Act. This comes along with rights to protest. If people want to go and start protesting the detention of Julian Assange, there will be new laws here on the books that are trying to be brought in that, let alone the fact that sus laws are effectively being brought in, that police do not need a reasonable suspicion to stop and search. They have an ability for some new type of control order that can prevent people going to demonstrations and attending them. This is all happening over here. The Boris Johnson government in overdrive. And of course, for your US listeners, it emerged that the British judge had lunch. The British judge who said, actually, I'm going to overturn the previous judgment by a magistrate, almost unprecedented, and say, actually, Julian Assange, despite all the psychiatric reports, is more than able to cope with the US justice system and what it'll do to him, supervised by the CIA that I know your source Isikoff talks about on your program, alleges tried to kill him or kidnap Julian Assange. Well, the former government minister here, Alan Duncan, who was a foreign minister who watched the removal of Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy from his political asylum, apparently in a special operations room in the Foreign Office here in London, calling him a worm. He had lunch with the judge, the actual judge in this case, who overturned the appeal, saying Assange can be extradited to face a grand jury in the United States.
Well, first, I want to say one thing first. The demonstration the other day in front of the UK consulate, we got the word out there. We helped organize it. There are a lot of groups involved, and I want to give them all credit. NYC Free Assange, and there's another Assange group. There are a lot of, Roger Waters saying that he was going to be there, Susan Sarandon saying that she was going to be there, helped drive out the turnout. Although it was by the seat of our pants, there should have been a lot more there, but we did it willy-nilly on a few days' notice. Getting back to this is very disturbing right now, what you're telling me about, first of all, the fact that it's just going to be an ex post facto thing, that they're going to be able to rescind and it's not binding if it gets to that court.
It's very unclear. I mean, the human rights groups have long been saying this is on the cards and it might be coming up. It just so happens it's happening this week. This week, days after the decision on Julian Assange. I mean, even The Guardian, the newspaper credited with persecuting Julian Assange, according to the UN Special Rapporteur, once partners of WikiLeaks, calls it the highly controversial reforms will create a new Bill of Rights, introducing a permission stage to deter spurious human rights claims. It's an attempt to stop what the Boris Johnson government believes is a spurious claims. I mean, some people have even said, rather than the Julian Assange case, it's to do with Meghan Markle winning an appeal against the Daily Mail newspaper over a letter Meghan Markle wrote to her father. And of course, the Daily Mail is a very important newspaper here as regards politicians' popularity and the democratic process in this country, one of the big newspapers here that politicians depend on, maybe to appease them too. These are obviously very dangerous times, but then again, I know you've had lots of people on saying this is a fait accompli. In a sense, Julian Assange's own defense is cooperating with a court that should have no jurisdiction, that's already dismissed free speech grounds. I mean, if you think of other places in the global south all around the world, you can imagine lawyers for the defense saying we do no longer respect this court on the grounds that you are not permitting freedom of speech and are breaking the United Nations Charter. They are persevering in a conventional fashion, desperately trying to save Julian Assange's life. And shortly after that hearing, we now know, reportedly, he had a stroke in Belmarsh prison where terrorists, where Al-Qaeda people are imprisoned. He's killed nobody. And all he's done is reveal to the whole world war crimes and misdemeanors by governments of all stripes, Russia, China, the United States, Assange is a journalist extraordinaire, impartial in revelations that condemn governments all around the world.
They are not going to abide by this treaty they have, or whatever convention they have with this European court. Why are we subscribing to the British court and their entire judicial system? Why should we take them seriously? Because obviously they're nothing more than a rubber stamp of what the DOJ wants, and whoever controls the DOJ at this moment. They just want him, and they're going through this entire charade for what purpose?
Well, the fear is, isn't it, if Britain does not have a justice system in effect and is basically a complete satellite of the United States as regards whoever your politicians are, they can just order Britain, its old colonial master, to hand over anyone it wants, regardless of psychiatric reports, regardless of the UN Human Rights Council of Special Rapporteurs. Then it would appear it really will be up to the New York Times and all the other partners of Julian Assange in those WikiLeaks publications, the Washington Post, all those collaborators, because I know no subpoena has been issued to the Sulzberger family or Amazon retrospectively for owning the Washington Post, for printing the the same things that Julian Assange is accused of doing based on the Espionage Act. Presumably it'll be up to them and to a much better turnout in the United States than there has been here in Britain as regards the seminal nature of this case and what it means for any national in anywhere, any place in the world who happens to get a video sent to them of US soldiers murdering journalists via helicopter gunship.
Lay out some of the things for those people listening to this for the first time. Some of the outstanding pieces of work that Julian Assange has laid out there. Just enumerate some of them for those.
Well, I mean, I suppose given the MSNBCs of this world associate him very closely with the Trump campaign and Hillary Clinton, what Julian Assange gave us, quite apart from the war crimes that he revealed to the world, which I will mention, but he revealed how the Democratic Party of the United States sabotaged the presidential campaign of Bernie Sanders. I think that, and therefore altered the outcome perhaps of your presidential election, allowing Donald Trump to be elected. Assange showed the emails that led to the resignation of top DNC officials. So they were true. It's not like Julian Assange reveals things that are conspiracy theories or whatever. He reveals things that are true, led to officials resigning at the DNC, that showed deliberate attempts to sabotage Bernie Sanders' endorsement by the DNC at primaries and elsewhere as regards funding, and therefore stopped him, a candidate that perhaps could have beaten Trump, given the baggage that Hillary Clinton had with her because of the presidency of Bill Clinton, arguably. So in that sense, Julian Assange revealed why the United States got Trump in one way. He also revealed the Bush administration's assaults on human rights as regards torture, as regards rendition, as regards notably the actions of US officials in denying atrocities in Iraq, for instance, which is where the famous collateral murder video, people can watch that online, showing American soldiers killing Reuters journalists and civilians. He also revealed the power of corporations over our democratic lives in countries all around the world. And so they were used in African countries against corrupt governments. They were used all around the world. But for the United States, I suppose the big one was this one where he took on Hillary Clinton. And that's
But he's not being charged for that. He's not
being charged in the Espionage Act for what is it? It's for stealing secrets. But of course, he stole no secrets. Like any journalist, he got secrets and he published them. There's a difference between publishing and journalism and the whistleblower. Of course, we believe in whistleblower protection too, but as we know, Obama, he didn't care about what Obama tortured one of the whistleblowers for Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and that led to a resignation by PJ Crowley in the Obama administration. He wasn't going to do it. So, we know whistleblowers don't stand much of a chance there in the United States. But of course, famously, this is the first time that we have a journalist, kind of, because we know lots of other journalists die in mysterious circumstances in the United States. Gary Webb coming to mind, who exposed COINTELPRO, Michael Hastings, who famously exposed McChrystal and the Afghanistan catastrophe that arguably led to the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. I think the Brad Pitt film, there's a Brad Pitt film based on the Michael Hastings book. Hastings died mysteriously after his expose of that Afghanistan story. We know how journalists, things happen to journalists over there in your country, but this is the first time officially all journalists anywhere in the world, regardless of nationality, can be sentenced to a possible 175 years in the United States for revealing war crimes.
Well, the name of the Gary Webb, it's called Killing the Messenger. It's a movie you can actually watch on Netflix. I believe that's the name of it. I want to play this clip for those, just a portion of it, of collateral damage of these Reuters reporters being murdered. and everyone in the helicopter seeming to gloat over it.
You're clear. All right, firing. Line here. When the phase line out. Let me know when you get it. One shoot. Light them all up.
002 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shoot. Keep shoot. All right, we just engaged all 8 individuals. Yeah, we got 2 birds. We're still firing. Roger. Got him.
6 is a 2-6. We'll move, but we got
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
bypass.
God damn it, Kyle. All right. I hit my head.
Is that really the main cause, is exposing that? Do you think that's the reason, or is it Vault 7?
Vault 7, we should explain, shows the hacking tools used by the CIA to be able to hack into our mobile phones, our cell phones, our computers. It should also be known that Julian Assange facilitated the escape from perhaps torture and death of former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden. He had to run to Moscow. I don't think he even wanted to go to Moscow for fear of his life, after revealing that our cell phones can be turned off and on by a network of facilities run by the CIA and the British security services and the Australian security services. So I think maybe one has to look at Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, former head of the CIA, and how he said that Julian Assange basically ran a non-state hostile intelligence service, a kind of rival CIA, when in fact Julian Assange was running a journalism organization, and the hatred in Mike Pompeo can be discerned from his statement in Langley when he was head of the CIA, where he said, we've got to get this guy. And of course, US authorities are on the record, politicians are on the record for saying drone strike and murder Julian Assange.
Right. We're talking with Afshin Rattansi, the host of Going Underground, George Galloway, the host of Mother of All talk shows, and I, former MP. And I concur that it's the best show, bar anything, out there. And you can see that on RT. You can see it at the website of Going Underground. Afshin Rattansi, you do an incredible job with that program. You've interviewed Julian Assange before. We're going to play a quick clip of that interview, one of those interviews from and come right back.
If we go back and look at what the US military, Robert Gates and General McMullen, said about our publications of creating hypotheticals that maybe they would cause harm, our publications documented their involvement at a case-by-case level in the deaths of more than 20,000 people in Afghanistan and more than 108,000 people in Iraq. Those are the stakes that we were talking about. Not only the dissolution of 2 societies, but the deaths of over 100,000 people. And so when you want to distract from this, you just make the same accusation to the person that is making accusation against you. It's a kindergarten rhetoric. Your mother smells. No, your mother smells. I mean, it's really that pathetic.
I mean, often it's been the most, in inverted commas, liberal journals and magazines that seem to attack you the most.
We should make clear, just to put down on record, in 2013, in the trial of Chelsea Manning, who was subsequently sentenced to 35 years for giving information to the media, and only for giving information to the media. There's no other allegation against them. That the General Carr, the person responsible for investigating whether any harm was caused by our publication, the US government said under oath that they couldn't find a single person who had been harmed, not a single person.
There's the interview with Julian Assange, one of 3 prior to him being shut down, I think 2016, 2017. What kind of person? You've got to know him better than any journalist I know. What was his character like, one-on-one?
I mean, he's one of the brightest people I've ever met. It's so sad, actually, that at least the Deputy Prime Minister of his home country, Australia, finally is slamming the United States and the Biden administration for de facto trying to kill an Australian national, Julian Assange. But he had to say, whilst slamming the attempts by the US government and the British connivance, British justice, so-called justice system's connivance, had to say, he's not a nice guy. I don't like him. These kind of personal attacks, which UN Special Rapporteur on Torture Nils Melzer said constitute a kind of defamation of torture to discredit him continually. I don't know where they come from. The Guardian newspaper does it. There are time and time again attempts to destroy his character in the public eye, and he's actually one of the greatest journalists, greatest people I've ever met. He thinks about everything in a geopolitical, complex, power structural way that all journalists should think about, whether they're on the crime beat at their local police station or covering the United Nations and Congress.
For BAI listeners, we're going to go out right now with a little bit of music by Nils Melzer. And if you'll stick around for a few more minutes, Afshin, we'd like to get some added comments from you, and we'll put that on the WBAI website later. I'm Randy Credico, Live on the Fly here on 99.5 FM in New York City. Goodbye to the BAI listeners, and we'll be right back with some more of Afshin Rattansi. Okay, we're back. That was Nils Melzer, Moonlight Sonata. He's a great piano player. Let's talk about Nils Melzer a little bit, because you've mentioned him 3 times. How vital has he been in galvanizing the movement to save Assange?
The role of UN Special Rapporteurs has been critical in illuminating the plight of Julian Assange and many other torture victims. The whole idea of Special Rapporteurs has been very important, but Nils Melzer, the way I know he has a new book coming out in the English language in February. I know it's already out in Sweden. Is quite an amazing take and very important, given his the high offices of being a United Nations Special Rapporteur, to explain how cleverly it seems to have all been organized. Make out he's a sex predator, destroy him in a myriad of different ways, a hacker, just destroy Julian Assange so that he can never be defended. Because we must remember, at the beginning, he had way more defenders. Lady Gaga and him, there are pictures of them all. What happened to all the big high celebrity backers of Julian Assange? Not only because of the Hollywood military-industrial complex, but I think because, ironically, the Me Too movement somehow was weaponized to attack Julian Assange when he was never charged of anything, despite Comcast broadcasting lies about him ever being charged. The defamation has been on a spectacular scale, and yet if you look at all post-1945 history in the United States, we know how radicals have been horrifically defamed, and Julian Assange just comes in a long line from Paul Robeson to Charlie Chaplin to Arthur Miller to who else, to Gene Seberg. I mean, how many great people.
Roscoe Arbuckle, Hollywood actor, was defamed and nearly destroyed. He was destroyed. He lost his career. Only the wife of Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, came to his aid, and he was exonerated. But this is a destructive thing, a destructive, ruse that they used. And Melzer really, in this book, The Trial of Julian Assange, lays it all out. He did his own investigation. He speaks Swedish. He went to Switzerland and painstakingly did an exhaustive investigation. And the whole thing was a hoax that was kept up on fumes, mostly by your CPS, the Crown Prosecutor Services, strong arming the
which was run by Sir Keir Starmer, who replaced Jeremy Corbyn here. Jeremy Corbyn, a keen defender of Julian Assange, the head of the Crown Prosecution Service that was telling Sweden to continue a prosecution of Julian Assange. He's the Labour leader now. He's the person who is running against Boris Johnson on a hawkish, right-wing, arguably, policy route to power at all costs, continually supporting US intelligence agencies' views about the world and US foreign policies around the world.
Tell us more about him, and why isn't there more support for Julian Assange within the House of Commons? Is it a one-party body now, would you say?
I mean, someone more cynical might say that every British politician knows that if they don't do what, in effect, the briefing papers from the US Embassy in London tell them to about foreign policy, they will get into trouble. Like sheep, they file into their voting booths for every war the United States ever deems necessary in the defense of freedom and the NATO way. The politicians know they get into trouble. Jeremy Corbyn got into a great deal of trouble with lies about him being an anti-Semite, just for him backing up what UN General Assembly resolutions and UN Security Council resolutions say about Palestine, for instance. And Jeremy Corbyn supported Julian Assange, was a vehement critic of US foreign policy under George W. Bush. He went. We now have Sir Keir Starmer, who's appointing people who voted through Tony Blair's support for George W. Bush in 2003. He's completely changed the British Labour Party. Arguably, in the United States, as I mentioned earlier, Bernie Sanders' campaign was, to the detriment of his campaign, were DNC insiders, some of whom resigned after Julian Assange exposed them for anti-democratic practices in the primaries. Similarly, Joe Biden, I mean, perhaps not as supporting as many wars today as his president when he was vice president, Barack Obama, certainly part of very much of that foreign policy firmament in the United States. On the Foreign Relations Committee, Joe Biden for so many years that facilitated the funding of the catastrophic wars for the United States, for the whole world, let alone for Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and Syria.
He was one of the most fervent exponents of Plan Colombia as well. He has a very shady record that's not based on human rights. Did it surprise you when his administration under Merrick Garland continued the prosecution, filed this appeal from that started with the Trump administration?
It's so often said, isn't it, that his view of people incarcerated, tortured, what is Joe Biden's view going to be? He was an architect of mass incarceration. Why is it 25% of the world's detained population is in the United States with only 3% of the world population? Biden, how many African Americans have died or had lives in a sort of living hell because of Joe Biden legislation that attacked African Americans and people of color in the United States?
Yes, it's really shameful. So it is no surprise that he would appeal this, and he did.
Let alone Kamala Harris, for that matter, given that we never know about Biden's health. Kamala Harris, of course, the California prosecutor who seemed to leverage the death penalty and support it sometimes, and certainly allowed innocent people to be imprisoned under her watch.
Yes, the 3 strikes and you're out. She did a lot while she was prosecutor, not turning over evidence, framing. You know, when she started out in San Francisco as a district attorney, deposing a very progressive district attorney there. And cynically, here's a woman that's Black, turns out to be worse for African Americans in the state of California than the previous white prosecutor. We're talking with Afshin Rattansi, the host of my favorite show, Going Underground. And let's talk about Going Underground.
Just finally, because they're going to run out now.
I know we're going to close with this, Going Underground. There's nothing like it here, but people can watch Going Underground on the website. They can watch it on RT America, I believe. How do people get to watch it? I know I asked you.
Actually, because obviously under the Obama administration and the Trump administration, more and more cable operators were pressured not to put RT out, as far as I understand it. Obviously, the United States bans television stations. It does. I don't know about this First Amendment, how it manages to do that and exert influence, to register any thoughts from foreign nation broadcasters as kind of thought crimes. We're very proud of Going Underground. People can watch it online. This year we've had the daughter of Qasem Soleimani assassinated by Donald Trump, of course, the Iranian general who fought with U.S. troops against Al-Qaeda and ISIS Daesh in Syria. We've had some quite an amazing year of interviews. People will watch that as we come to the end of 2021, let alone our coverage of coronavirus, one of the big stories this year, hasn't it been?
Yeah, and this Saturday you can see an interview with the great Tariq Ali. Any final thoughts on Julian Assange, his fate?
Well, I think given that we now know he had a stroke in the Supermax prison where people have died of coronavirus, people have committed suicide. We know that he carried a razor blade there, Julian Assange, and psychiatric reports show that in effect British authorities have driven him to the point of taking his own life. Let's hope that Julian Assange is alive next year. If he dies, let's hope that people will even understand that now journalism means death.
All right, we're going to close on that. Thank you, Afshin Rattansi. I'm Randy Credico. This has been a special Assange Countdown to Freedom here on WBAI with the redoubtable Mr. Afshin Rattansi. Thank you and good luck.
Keep on.
So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell it from a cold steel red, a smile from a veil? Do you think you can tell? And if they get you to trade your heroes for ghosts, hot ashes for trees, and hot air, cool breeze, cold comfort for change, and then you exchange roll on the pitch. I wish you were here, Julie. You just do our soul swimming in a fishbowl, year after year, running over the same old ground. What have we found? The same old fear. And I wish that you were here. Thank you so much. Julian Assange, we are with you. Free Julian Assange!